is where we'll start, Ephesians 5:17. And I want to challenge you today to do some research and to do some development. And that's the message, research and development. Research and development. And we'll leave these out. There might be opportunity to get some more, I suppose, as long as you're not falling asleep. But that's when you need the coffee, isn't it? When you're falling asleep. Ephesians 5 and verse 17. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Wherefore be ye not unwise, but understanding what the will of the Lord is. Ask yourself this question: what is the will of God for my life? Is the will of God for your life? And you take that answer. And for me, I would answer that for you today. I would say the will of God for my life is to get the gospel and a copy of the Word of God into every home, into every person in New Zealand, and to start churches in New Zealand. I believe 100%, and I'm committed to 100% that will of God for my life. Now, as I look at the next 5-10 years, I can see God lining up circumstances toward that will, but realize the will of God is not a stagnant calling. Okay, it's not something that happens in your life and you are set there for the rest of your life and now there's a contentment, because what that does, it causes two things. Okay, if we look at the will of God and we say, look, this is God's will for my life and we need to be 100% committed to it, we need to act upon it like it is the will for the rest of our life, but realize that God is going to shift and change and bring you into places you never expected. Right? There's missionaries that served 20, 30 years, and God called them back to be missions directors and pastors, et cetera, et cetera. You get what I'm saying here. And when you're stagnant and content, it causes a reserved or okay, I'm set, I know what God's will is. So you might be sitting there, and you fill in the blank. God's will for my life is to be a pastor. God's will for my life is to be a teacher. And if we're not careful, we'll soon become comfortable with that calling. We'll say, okay, I've arrived. I know the calling. It also causes frustration if you don't know that calling. Some of you might be here today, and you're here taking a degree, but you might not know how God is going to use that yet, and so you might be frustrated. Why do I not know exactly what God's will is for my life? Because God's will, I'll describe it like this. I'll describe it like a river. Okay? And God's will, my pastor in New Zealand, he described this in this way to me, and it was very helpful. He said, the will of God is like a river. And that river, very wide at different parts, but the point of a river is that it has all of these small inlets and creeks running into it, doesn't it? Imagine a river coming off of a mountain. I live right next to a river that comes off of a mountain, and the inlets come off that mountain, and the little creeks, and there's dozens, hundreds of them, and they all form the river, and then the river runs into the ocean. The will of God is like that river, where as we make small decisions, and as we learn and as we grow and as we're discipled to be more like Christ, and as we come to Bible college and get a degree, and as we are in ministries, those are all those little creeks that end up in the will of God, that large river, let's say. And I don't want any of us to become frustrated when we find ourselves in a little one of those creeks that God is developing. And you say, what's the will of God for my life? Stay faithful in that little creek, doing that task, doing that learning, doing that research and development that God has you in. And if you're faithful in that and you're obedient in that, then God will reveal to you over time, and you'll find yourself serving Him in His perfect will. Amen. Don't be content when you know His will. Be always growing, and don't be frustrated not knowing His will, as long as you're faithful and searching. And so in Ephesians 5:17, it uses two words. It says, unwise. Wherefore be ye not unwise, ignorant of your duty is what that says. Be not ignorant of your duty, but understanding, meaning to study, consider, or acquaint yourself with the will of God. Study, consider, and acquaint yourself with the will of God. If you're seeking God's will, why aren't you doing anything that demonstrates you're seeking it? I'm afraid we spend a lot of time researching different things. Researching, right? The best coffee, Wade. Guys researching for the fantasy football draft. researching the Tuesday waiver wire pickups. And we put a lot of effort and research and time into things that we care about. And we're in Bible college. We say, I'm searching for the will of God. I'm seeking the will of God. And yet there's no research going on in our life. Yes, we're in a classroom and we're consuming knowledge that's being pushed into us. And we're in ministries and those things. But how much time do we spend researching what God might have for us? And I want to give you a few specific areas directed to each one of you groups today. I'm going to illustrate this with a book that I read several years ago of an Olympic runner, Lopez Lomong. He's a Sudanese refugee from the 1990s. And Lopez grew up Kenyan in a Sudanese growing up in a Kenyan refugee camp. And as he was growing up, he loved to run. He'd run laps around the outside of the camp. While all the other boys were playing soccer, he'd just run laps. He loved to run. And one day, someone brought a television set onto that refugee camp. And they were all gathered around it, excitedly watching the Olympics. And they were running in the race. And for the first time, he realized this thing that I enjoy to do, people get to do it for their country. And people get to do it in front of thousands. And there's cheering and there's applause and there's awards. And he said, this is just what I love to do. I didn't even realize this was a sport. And long story short, he came to America, and this was 2007. He gained his citizenship. 2008 and 2012, he ran in the Beijing London Olympics for the U.S. An amazing story from nothing to something in terms of the sports realm. But what I find interesting about his story is he would have never gotten here running in the Olympics for his country had someone not first shown him the Olympics on TV in that refugee camp. Right? He's not going to sit around thinking in his bedroom or on the ground on his mat. He's not going to sit around thinking, boy, I wish I could run in the Olympics. I wish I could do this as a sport and receive the fame and the glory and run in the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Because he would have never known had someone not showed it. Yeah. And I want to use that to illustrate this part of research and going on your own and trying to find the will of God, to seek the will of God, to study and consider the will of God. So for you missions majors, and you know the country you're going to, how many of you could say that? You know the country God, this isn't a trick question, okay? Okay, a couple of you here. There should be a plan in place, if not already. I know the country God has called me to. I intend to go visit that country, let's say 12 months from now, or within the next 12 months, or within the next 24 months. This is what I have to do. I have to get off work for this next year. I've got to save vacation time to do this. I've got to save up money to do this. There should be a plan in place because you know where God's called you. You need to get to that country and do a survey trip. You should know more about that country, that region, politically, religiously, socioeconomically. You should know more about that country than anyone else in this room because God has put that place and those people on your heart. And so you're already one step into the progression. You know in terms of what God's will is for the next few years of your life, and so you need to be fully committed to getting through there. You need to have research being done right now. You should be researching this. Those of you missions majors that don't know a country, how many of those would we have in the room? Okay, I was there till till after I finished college. After I finished my last year of school here. Missions majors who don't know, you should know of and about, I would say, the top 10 unreached countries in the world. You should know what those are. You should know where they're at on the map. You should know what religion they are. When I say unreached, it could be people who have never heard. It could be Muslim countries. It could be fill in the blank, whatever it is. You should know the countries within the most need of missionaries. You should know the countries that do not have a Bible in their language. It's just under 2,000 people groups do not have a Bible in their language in the world. It's 25% of the world's population. And these should be things that you start to study and learn, because how is God going to call you to a country or a people that you've never heard about? Right? You're not going to wake up someday and say, oh my goodness, God's called me to the Zonka people in Southeast Asia. No, it's not going to happen because you've never heard of them. And so you should be having the due diligence to be understanding what the will of the Lord is. And even those in this room that may not be called down that specific route, there are other areas of research: pastoral, assistant, evangelist. I have a suggestion for you. And I experienced this yesterday, inconsequentially. You can do what I call digital shadowing of a pastor. Okay? That's a famous term that I just coined just right now. All right. Shadow someone that you respect in the ministry. You know, it's very likely if you approach someone and you say, Pastor so-and-so, send him an email. You see him at a conference coming up in a few weeks, say, Pastor so-and-so, I just want to follow your ministry. I want to learn from you. Very likely, if there's someone worth following, they will deflect that and say, no, no, no. But insist they have qualities that you lack, and so you need to follow them to gain those qualities. Okay? Push that line out there. All right? And say, no, 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 I really want to follow. I want to send you an email every now and then. I want to check in, see what things you're doing in your ministry that God has blessed, see how God is working, and just inquire a little bit, push a little bit. Push a little bit. Find someone. That's part of the research. Finding someone. Everyone in this room knows a pastor that God is using right now. You know an evangelist that God is using. Find someone that you can model in your life. Say, I want to follow you as you follow Christ. I sat yesterday with a missions director, and we were talking about New Zealand. He's very familiar with the country, having been there himself. And as we talked, he said two things. We met years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. He gave me lots of advice, and I wrote it all down. It's valuable stuff. And God has seen each of those things come to pass. Project ideas, ministry ideas, philosophy of ministry, all those things have come to pass. So when I met with him yesterday, I said, look, this is what you told me 3 years ago, and God has enabled all of that to happen, and I think it's because of the advice you gave me. He said, that's great. He said, I'm glad you asked questions. And so we got talking, and I was asking him advice about something else. I said, hey, what are your thoughts on this ministry idea? And he paused, and he thought, and he said, well, I wouldn't usually tell someone this, but because you listened to what I had to say before, I'm going to tell you now. Now catch that. This is a man who was in 22 countries this year. He got back last week, fulfilled his ministry duties where he's at, and he leaves tomorrow to go to Africa again. Okay? He's a busy man. But yet he took an hour and a half out of his busy schedule, not because I'm somebody, but because I listened to the advice he gave and I asked the questions. And so if you're looking to go into ministry, find someone in that area and ask questions and listen and follow through on the advice they give. So then when you go back, you could say, look, what you told me worked, and I want more help. I want more help. That's part of the research for those of you that are pastoral, assistant pastoral, evangelism. Education. Education. How many of you guys are education majors? Don't be shy. Come on. All right, we'll just laugh at you after. No, just kidding. And then I'm guessing a lot of the ladies, education majors. Okay, all right, couple hands. Education. Luke 6:45 says, for out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaketh. Out of the abundance of his heart, his mouth speaketh. I had several teachers that, well, really all of them stick out in my mind. I try and thank them every year from elementary and secondary school. One of them particularly, Nancy Landon. How many know Mrs. Landon? She taught me in the 5th and 6th grade. She taught some of you probably. And 5th and 6th grade, that was the first time I preached, was in her class in 5th and 6th grade. Now, what is she doing having guys get up and preach when she's supposed to be teaching math? Did she not have a lesson plan that day? I don't know. Both the guys in that class, myself and Austin Reed, that was the first time we preached. We're both preaching today. Nancy Landon, it wasn't just a lesson plan that she had, it was a heart. And more than learning the lesson plan, we learned her heart. The reason I enjoyed Preacher Woodward's classes so much here at college is because we got more of his heart than we did the lesson plan. As I was preparing this, I thought of over 20 life lessons that he taught, just off the top of my head, over 20 life lessons that I learned from his classes. Things that he would just come in and talk about, things that were on his heart. And so teachers, education majors in this room, whether elementary or secondary, your heart will come through in your classroom, and I'm challenging you to fill your heart with an abundance of things that will lead those young people to serve Christ with their life. There could be missionaries, there could be pastors, there can be evangelists in your classroom as young children, and you're not just there to fill a lesson plan and fill their head with math and reading and those things, although those are important, but you're there to fill them with your heart that you have for God. And I challenge and encourage you to start now filling your heart with those things. As a general studies student, or video production or graphic design or those things. Am I on the right track? Are those majors here? Okay. All right, good. A couple points for you. No worldwide trends in news. You say, what does that have to do with anything? There's going to be a man here on Wednesday night, Caleb Garraway. How many have heard Brother Garraway preach? He's got a gospel film that he put out and blasts across the world, across Facebook, etc. An amazing tool. In fact, in the last letter he wrote, there are more people viewing that video per day than are being born worldwide. Think about that. There are more people viewing that gospel film per day than are being born worldwide. So this is someone who is aware of trends and news, and when war breaks out in Ukraine, he's sending that video to Ukraine because he sees that coming and has it translated and ready. War breaks out in Afghanistan, or should I say our country tries to withdraw from Afghanistan, and he's got that video in Afghanistan days later because he's ready and he's in on the know of what's going on. And so those of you that are here and you're studying graphic design so you can work at a church and do some of this stuff, I challenge you in these classes in your own time, research those skills and research what's going on in the world and pray and ask God, can I do something for you with these skills that I'm learning? And with this research that I'm gaining, this knowledge that I'm gaining. See, I don't have time to sit down and produce videos, but I can pay someone that knows how to get the gospel to New Zealand. And that's what I want to do. I'm paying guys right now to make gospel videos with a Kiwi accent, with Kiwi footage, so I can blast them across New Zealand and see people get saved. And there needs to be people coming out of this college right here that have worked and prayed, and they have those skills and abilities that can use that for God. Music. The music majors should know more about the fight of good and evil music than anyone else in this room. All right, I didn't learn a tuba in high school just so I could play a tuba for an offertory. I don't do that in New Zealand, okay? It's not just about the instrument that you're able to play. It's about the philosophies behind music, the war that Satan uses with music, the battle that's raging, and you being able to take your knowledge of music and step into a church and bless that church, not just with the talent that God's given you, but with the research and the knowledge that you've gained, your understanding of what the will of the Lord is. Whether that's songwriting, whether that's teaching others. You know, I never thought I would be teaching my pastor's sons in New Zealand how to sing specials and how to pick songs out and all those things, how to pick songs out for the kids' choir that he leads. God will use the work and the effort you put in today. And I'll address the fact that you don't have time in just a minute, okay? We'll get there. Be creative. At the end of the day, I'm challenging you to be creative with how you go about learning these things. I mentioned a guy a minute ago, and he travels, this is a friend of mine, he travels the world preaching in the ministry God has him in now. And he's closed off to some countries because of where other countries he's been to. Okay? Your passport gets stamped with certain countries, you can't go to other countries. Oops. Guess I can't go preach there. So he's getting creative. He says, well, there is a way I could get a Swiss passport. It's all legal, okay? It's all legal. It's through his family lineage. But you have to get creative sometimes with how you're filling your head with opportunities and knowledge and just grabbing at things saying, maybe God can use this talent, maybe God can use this knowledge, maybe God can use this, and be understanding of all these ways, all these creeks and avenues and inlets that will meet into the will of God for your life. Be ever expanding what you can do in the will of God. Now, next I'll bring you over to Matthew chapter 4. Matthew chapter 4. And we're out of time here, but I just want to leave you with this thought. How many Bible college students are limiting their ceiling by not investing time into researching and developing the will of God for their life? Guys, in sports, athletes limit their ceiling, don't they? It can be through injury, but it can be through negligence. It could be through inability to take advantage of drills and sessions that are available to them. Every athlete wants to be at the top of their game to open their opportunities up, to get the biggest paycheck, to win the championship. And my challenge to you today, research and develop. And I didn't get to everything I wanted to, but research and develop, that you might open up the opportunities that God has for you. We have projects going on in New Zealand I never thought possible. It's all God, this project. It looks like a book to you, but I don't have time for the stories behind this. It's an amazing project. It's one of the things. I brought it up here because it's one of the things that God has allowed to happen to get the gospel out simply because of taking opportunities, not when I'm 27, 26, 25, when I was 18 years old and I was in Bible college. When I was 18 years old and I took an opportunity and God worked through that. Matthew chapter 4, and we'll be done. Verse 18. Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. Notice two things. Straightway, they left their nets immediately, it says. And they were also involved in a work, weren't they? Now, that wasn't the work that God was going to call them to do. God wasn't calling them to be another fisherman, but he was calling them to be a fisher of men. So they were involved in a parallel work to what God had for them. So today, right now in Bible college, use whatever time you have. It's not the time to say no to opportunities. Okay? Someone asks something on the bus route, the nursing home, here at the college, whatever it might be. Now is not the time you say, I don't have time, I don't have money, I don't have fill in the blank, whatever it is. You probably have the most of those resources that you'll have for a long time in your life. So what are you going to do? Use that excuse for 10 years? No, right now, say yes to the opportunities that God is bringing your way. Amen. Research and development. I wish I could give you more today, but that's all God has for us, and so we'll bow our heads in prayer. Dear Jesus, we thank you.